There certainly was not a unified vision among people, among the city stakeholders, and that's where you really needed to show that you're not there to make a quick buck, upzone it, sell it off, and get out of there.
This episode features Michael Padavic, Senior Principal for the Austin office of Dowling Group. Earlier this year, Michael approached us with an intriguing premise that while everything is big in Texas, it seems that urban infill lot sizes are shrinking to accommodate higher densities and more attainable housing, including single family. And not only in Austin, but now statewide based on legislation passed and signed into law that will affect the majority of cities and citizens in Texas. Michael gives us some great insight on the challenges and opportunities afforded by high-density single-family, who's developing those urban lots, and the role of planning and design to ward off pushback from NIMBYism and attract buyers otherwise locked out of that housing segment. So enjoy this ride-along conversation between Michael Padavic and ProBuilder's head of content, me, Rich Bensaka.
My name's Michael Padavic. I'm a senior principal with Dowling Group. I'm located in the Austin office, which is a small satellite office for the company. They're based out of the Bay Area. This office was started in mid 2022. I've been with the company almost 2 years now. And, a lot of the work that the company does is residential in nature, whether that's, single family detached, townhouse, mixed use, multifamily. And that's my focus, is growing the residential and multifamily market for Dowling in Texas.
So Texas is known for going big, right? Everything's big in Texas.
Yeah.
So now, except
Yeah.
it seems for lot sizes and parcel sizes and houses. So give us a little bit about what's going on in Texas. And I know that Austin was one of a few cities already kind of taking measures to reduce lot sizes or kind of make it easier for denser development of housing to be put in place. So
Yeah.
maybe start us there and just kind of where we are now and give us a little bit of background of how Texas is getting smaller in some degrees.
Yeah. That's a great spin on it. Yeah, I mean, I think the key word here driving everything is affordability. And and so I think on the single family side of things, um, that people have been interested in finding ways to make those opportunities more affordable and more attainable. And so I think that's really driving all of this. And so you know, how does that happen? And so we've had some success in Austin specifically over the last 10 plus years is rezoning properties to a little higher uh, density, but still keeping that sort of single family nature in place. And then I think it wasn't certainly wasn't a driver, uh, you know, for Austin making these changes, but it just sort of showed that, if you can get one or two or 10 more units on a property, the overall price of those, units comes down. And so what you look for, what are the compromises that people are willing to make to live in the city, closer to downtown, closer to the city as an amenity. And that's where you see, some of the smaller footprints.
So these parcels that we're talking about, and I do want to get to kind of the state, what the state has done
Yeah.
to affect, roughly, in my calculation, about 2/3 of the population of Texas is going to be affected by this law that again is promoting higher density, smaller lots, and that kind of housing development that's going to be more attainable, affordable. Um, but we're talking about parcels that are empty, or maybe are they all greenfield? Are they brownfield? They're obviously smaller lots because they're kind of infill. They're part of already
Yeah.
a big landscape. So tell me a little bit about kind of what kind of parcels we're talking about.
I think you'll see a mix, maybe, like, again, a specific example of a project we had worked on took, let's say it was 3 acres, and it was one or two homes on these large acre lots, and combine them to put 30 plus homes on those, when you upzone it and work within, sort of the city, the previous. I mean, it still exists, but what the city had previously had in play with the land development code. And so that's just an example of a property where, I would say it's for the current time is underutilized with, one home on an acre plus lot. That's, you know, let's say 2 miles from downtown. Other places where we're seeing it is property that's adjacent to churches that are underutilized, or they're, willing to kind of sell off. Um, Other properties are they're just maybe they're challenging in terms of topography or trees, again, specific to Austin. Um, I think people are going to be a little bit more sensitive to properties that are in flood zones or close to flood zones. I would say those would be areas that maybe 10 years ago were, people were willing to take a little more risk on. But, given sort of recent events in Central Texas, and Austin specifically got remapped, so everything became a lot more restrictive in terms of flood zones. Um, I don't know if that's much in play, but those are the sort of things that might lead to a site being, close to the city and just underused or underutilized.
Right. And then as far as going through this process and upzoning these parcels that you identified or that were, clearly ripe for, like I said, being underutilized or not
Yeah.
used. Was there political pushback? Was there neighborhood pushback? I mean, or people all kind of in somewhat lockstep to say we need more affordable housing, and if higher density is going to deliver it, that's what we need to do with these parcels.
Yeah, I would say there certainly was not a unified vision among people, among the city stakeholders. And that's where you really needed to show that you're not there to make a quick buck, upzone it, sell it off and get out of there, right? You want to show to the neighborhood that that there is something a little more, it's not altruistic by any means, right? It's for profit market rate housing, but just by getting, a couple additional units on there, how, you're not doing anything outrageously different. But I would also say that the political environment in Austin has changed greatly over the last handful of years as the city council has gone from, I would say, one that was you didn't know. It was like maybe 50-50 what direction it would go on an upzone to right now. It's a heavy majority in terms of um, pro housing, kind of um, attitude.
I would think that one of the qualities of a proposal is how is this housing going to look? And you kind of alluded to that a little bit about, making sure it kind of fits the neighborhood and making sure that it's serving the neighborhood. It isn't going to be something that's going to stand out necessarily as an eyesore or something people walk by and go, "Oh, I can't believe that they built that there." Obviously, that's a lot on you and your team to kind of develop and design really, beautiful housing that people are going to walk by and be proud of that that's in their neighborhood. So talk to me about that and its role in upzoning and talking to neighbors and talking to, even a city council that seems to be kind of more on board now than they were maybe a half a dozen years ago, to getting projects through and getting them built and developed.
It is an interesting play because sometimes, it's more about your portfolio. Like, here's what we've done before, and so if there is, an ability to present something, yeah, it is important to kind of put that best, foot forward, and you know, there are certain aspects of homes that were built 70 years ago that are not necessarily the way you would want to design or build them, today. And so some of that is, just sort of expressing that, and communicating that, and what are the benefits of designing differently, a little smaller footprint. but I mean, there are the city can't be overly like prescriptive in terms of the aesthetics. So it's really just about being stewards and putting your best foot forward.
Okay, so the other part of this is the interest in the development community. So I know that there are large builders in Austin. There's large builders in Texas, the largest
Yeah.
builders in the country. Some of them are based there. Um, but is that who is this law or these ordinances? Who are they attracting? And again, because the parcels aren't all that big, there's not a lot of
Yeah.
volume there. Who's coming in and saying, yeah, that's something I want to develop and I want to work with you and get this done. Who's it really attracting from the development community?
The people who do take it down are usually a combination of builder developer, right? Not necessarily. And I think a lot of the larger builders where they like to exist is a developer does a master plan community and goes out to four builders, says we want you to build here, and they can take down their 50-foot wide lots, and that's their, they do that day in and day out. And I think especially with the sort of the market sensitivity today, they're looking for more and more just kind of their fairway, product. But land is expensive and it is still a little scarce. I mean, there's plenty of it out there, but in terms of like land at a value that pencils, it's fairly scarce. And so you do see some um, sort of the mid-range builders getting a little more creative. You have the small one-offs that are doing this sort of Austin's home initiative on a lot by lot basis. They're taking down one lot here, one lot there. We haven't really seen anybody create an assemblage and say, hey, we can do, 100 units on this. So it's a mixture of people that, sort of the smaller builders that want to maybe kind of do a little larger project as they're kind of growing. Or, there are some larger builders that every now and then want to take down a smaller lot because, they're just looking at something to fill the pipeline.
I want to shift a little bit to the state law that
Hmm.
I believe I don't think it's been signed into law, but it's certainly gone to the governor's desk. But were you surprised that the state took this kind of action to kind of follow Austin's lead and that of Houston as well? And it seems to have worked there. It seems to be working in Austin. Was there any kind of element of a surprise that the state would take this action rather than letting municipalities kind of take the lead and follow other cities?
There's some surprise in the community. I personally, I'm not very because it started to come up at the last session. There's, a couple newer, um, active groups that are just pushing this stuff at the state level and saying there's more opportunities. I think what they were sort of reacting to potentially at the time was, we saw in 2020, Austin was really close to passing a revised land development code, and then they got sued, and then the pandemic hit, and that all got put on hold, and then the city lost the lawsuit, and so then they took a second approach, and um, and had put forth like four new like codes to help with that, and three of those got sued. And so I think some people were saying, look, like we have these small activist groups that are shutting down the ability to do this. We got to take this to a higher level. And I think I think what you saw was largely a bipartisan effort at the state to say we need more affordable homes, and some of that is like a property rights thing, and some of that is like we need to help the people thing, and people just came together. And so I think it was just um, I think also Texas seeing what is happening in other states and affordability and wanting to be ahead of that, wanting to continue to attract people here. Um, and 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 so, I think you were just seeing people at the state level just wanting to put some of this in place. And I think what is surprising is how they didn't just take on one aspect. It's like we got to take on all of these, and everybody was on board and moving it through. So, um, to me, it's sort of like the magnitude is what was a little surprising, not the fact that people saw that it should be getting done.
Talk to me little bit about, how you approach these from a design standpoint to make sure that they, one, pencil, that they're buildable, that they're efficient, from a construction standpoint, but also, very livable. And people walk in and go, wow, this is so much better than what I'm seeing on the existing home market. And I'm going to go here because it's not only affordable, but I really, really like it. And yeah, it's maybe a little bit more dense than that neighborhood that has the existing home, but man, it's just a better house. Like,
Yeah.
how do you approach that?
Well, I think one thing that is not really design related, but is just sort of inherent into new product is that if you can offer new product at similar prices to the existing stock that's on there, um, with there are compromises people are willing to make, like we've talked about. Like, okay, maybe it has a smaller yard, but maybe there's a city park nearby, or uh, maybe it's just a smaller footprint for the house, but it just lives better, right? Maybe it's got a double height space, or it's an open plan instead of, a lot of the older homes, they were based on, sort of this formal living experience. And so not everybody uses a dining room anymore. That's one of the, I mean, that's kind of been pushed out, a while ago. I think so. So people, if you can have flexibility, if you can have a newer building, right? I mean, sustainability and resiliency. I mean, that's kind of the new buzzword in terms of sustainability is, can my house take on a hailstorm, or, is it out of the floodplain? Is it, insulated? Is it off the grid? All of these things. So that's just like all things that can be considered in a new product, which is really hard to do in an existing, to upgrade an existing home. One thing that's nice about putting together more than just three homes on a lot, but like, when you get upwards of 120 homes, when you start to build in efficiencies, economy of scale into, you know, th- the product itself, what do we try to do? Just look for sort of what just your building elements to make sure you're not doing anything kind of crazy in terms of like custom, ceiling height. Also combination of windows, like the more light you can bring into the house, just really just amplifies the livability. But you also don't want 11 window types on a unit. So how can you combine window types in a creative way that still, as a builder has some sort of repetition to it? Um, Resilient materials, or just like the judicious use of materials. And so you don't uh, have to put hardy on the whole thing, right? But if you just kind of are a little strategic about how you work in maybe wood or a different like profile, or some stone, things like that. But you do it in a judicious way that just really sort of helps create those moments of living, but doesn't necessarily overwhelm the community. Um, and then the other thing you need to think about in these dense communities is that the houses are closer together, and so the busier the houses are, the busier the community looks. And you go through, sort of this sort of traditional master plan community, and you see a lot of tack on and doodads, and it's just sort of a builder approach to giving some individuality to the homes. But if you do that on these more dense sites, it just overwhelms the community. So you got to find a way to keep it, beautiful but subtle, right? So those are all the kind of things at a high level that we try to pay attention to. I think it's really about, again, opening it up and livability, and just not being the sort of formalized, space that we're used to seeing. Being able to use spaces in multiple ways is helpful. Yeah, I mean, I think some of the space that, people get creative with is like under the stairs. That could be like you can tuck a powder room under there or use it for storage. You see some really cool concepts of like, you know, even like a wine, sort of a wine cellar under the stairs. One cost saving factor that, always kind of comes up and I think is a challenging conversation is your primary bedroom on the first floor, right? A lot of people like to think through that in terms of aging in place, which I think is very important conversation. At the same time, you're creating a bigger concrete footprint, right? And on one house, that's not a huge deal, but if you're extrapolating that across 120 homes, that starts to add up. And so you want to be smart about like, does everybody need living on the sort of that primary bedroom on the first floor, or is it you just want to be specific about it? And so I think it's just just trying to be smart about the way things stack, right? If you can contain sort of your mechanical systems and your bathrooms to a certain area, then you don't end up with, you know, wide walls or chases in the middle of rooms. I think that's where the more you plan it out and try to get ahead of it, you're left with less sort of, oops, how do I fix this in the field?
So last question that I've got, and I do want you to weigh in on stuff that we haven't maybe mentioned or I haven't mentioned, but um, you sent us four projects that kind of exemplify what we're talking about. One's, I think, a couple multifamily. Two, they're kind of one's a 13 unit project. One's a little bit more higher volume, attached, detached. Just a
Mhm.
really nice mix of product. Um, who's is it? Are they serving the market that they were intended to serve? Are you getting people that I don't know if there's any restrictions on income or things like that, but are you getting the people that were really, in need of attainable housing, market rate attainable housing, coming to those places and appreciating them?
Yeah, I think what we were seeing in those projects was a very specific demographic and an interesting trend that just is worth noting is that it was either empty nesters, people downzoning, or dual income, no kids, or young children, but you didn't see a lot of that sort of elementary, middle school, high school family in a lot of those projects. And some of them, the smaller project did cater to a little more family just because it was in a better school district. And I think that was what was driving a lot of the demographics of that project. In some respects, there were elements of those projects where it was like, well, where else can you buy this, in the city right now? Like it's providing a product that doesn't exist. And so from that element, it was exciting. It was a great delivery to the market. So I think, it could be serving a little bit more of a population. I think there's more there. I think in those projects that we were referencing, um, there was some affordable component to it, but it wasn't a huge deal. I think some of the affordable builders, affordable developers out there are doing a great thing at getting, to 50% or more of the product being affordable. And then, Austin, allows for some great entitlements once you get to those, figures. Um, it's just it's just difficult to make those pencil, unless you have access to the right funding. And even that's, with some of the dialogue around, federal funding right now, like that's going to become even more challenging. So a lot of people talk about rates and prices, and I think there's a lot of hidden things that just keep coming at people, like insurance rates and it's just like the sort of the hits keep coming, right? And so we just need to, as a design and development real estate community, need to be aware and keep on our toes and keep really pushing for affordability. If we can just kind of get it to be predictable, and um, I think that's kind of what we're all working for.